Day 6. Time passed slowly as she heard the sounds of snoring men crammed into a small room. Juno could only look out of the small window hole as she woke, the wine only helping for a few hours. She was used to the sweet snores of maidens when she woke, soothing her soul when one smacks her lips or moans in satisfaction. Yet the room echoed with ear-shattering snores as she was squished to the wall. It was a cold night. The icy mountains weren't that far away, and the sheets were thin. Even if Reinhardt was a strong and tall panthimata, he sought warmth like a house cat, having both the panrius in each arm on the floor. The top bunk was crammed with the twins, stacked on top of each other as they whistled in unison. That left Bullwag and Juno to share a small bunk. It wasn't too bad, for the big dog was a living heater. She was warm enough, only feeling the small breeze touching her belly from the small opening. Yet Bullwag took the majority of the space, trapping her in a small corner. He insisted that this would prevent anybody busting into the lockless room and seeing a female among men. She could appreciate the form of thought, but she was nervous about how long these boys were going to sleep. She worried if nature called. What if she needed a bit of water? But that wouldn't matter. The cool sky was slowly transitioning to morning, yet all she could do was keep her thoughts flowing. How long could she keep this charade going? It was fun at the bar, but now it was really taxing her mind. These boys hadn't showered for weeks because of the smell, but she couldn't judge. She was starting to get sour yesterday. She flicks her ears as the door opens, as the crew is startled. They mumbled curses at the door, yet Bullwag was still fast asleep. Man, Darla really kept me going last night, fellas. It was Goodboy gloating about his conquest, as the crew scoffed at his high energy. Bullwag still snored. Even the apocalypse wouldn't wake him up at that moment. Come on, guys. The river is free, and I have a bag of soap. She heard the man swirling the bag. Why would anybody take a bath right now? It's freezing. Finn complained, as Juno was starting to hear the difference in voices from his brother. He had less swagger. We have a lady boy here, and he doesn't want the majority of these female-infested establishments to find out, Goodboy pointed out, which had the group rummaging around the room. It sounded like they all grabbed their things and left, closing the door to make the room silent. This made Juno's heart race, now that she was trapped behind the block of flesh. Wait, excuse me, boys. I'm still behind Bullwag. Hello, don't leave me here. Mr. Bullwag, please wake up. She taps on Bullwag's back with her delicate hands, not really applying enough force to wake a pixie. She stops her panic as the door creaks open and laughter kicks in. Good thing that Bullwag covered her face. She had so many veins pop out from her forehead. Everyone, 1, 2, 3. It took the whole crew to pull Bullwag out of the tiny lower bunk bed, slamming him on the floor. The boys looked into the lower bunk bed and saw a pouting Juno with red eyes and bags under her eyes. They all cringed at her visible rage, and not at her Sunday's best, as the otherworlders would say. Bullwag started to wake up as the crew looked at him like a foreign alien was waking up. "Look what you did, Bullwag. You made Juno mad," Fen said with a hint of sass, everyone smiling at the big dog. He raised his head at her with a confused haze. Scene. The water was cold, making her skin and pelt break out in bumps, and her nipples perk up while she shivers, trying to maintain her body temperature. She stood a good distance away from the also very naked men behind her. Fen and Finn were doing cannonballs into the water, causing splashes to tickle her lower back. She slowly rubbed her body with the soap Goodboy had lined up, smelling like honey roasted nuts. She didn't have to cover much. The suds covered her rear and her back, and the breast. She felt some stairs on her back when she rubbed the honey nut soap on her ashen hair that reached to the middle of her spine. "Never knew you had such well-kept hair under that robe of yours, Juno," Bullwag complimented, making the centelope flick her ears from the compliment. His sincere critic had her turn at the group to thank him. Yet she forgot that they were also very naked. It was quick, but it was enough in her view. It was Reinhardt, Finn, and Bullwag. Reinhardt sat in the water, rubbing his neck and really tightening his muscles. He was well sculpted and toned. Even his neck had muscles. Finn was the opposite, having a more lad-like body and smoother skin and coat than her, hurting her womanly pride. Bullwag was a surprise to her. She thought that his fat-to-muscle ratio was leaning toward the former. That was false. He did pack some extra pounds, but his peaks were bigger than Reinhardt by double. Yet that wasn't the only thing that was doubled. She didn't see Finn's buddy because it was being censored by Bullwag's third leg. "Holy Lord," she screamed, shutting herself back into her corner. The group laughed as Bullwag saw his floating log, blushing as he knew she saw its glory. "I'm so sorry, Miss Juno." He tries to apologize as he scars the maiden's eyes. He splashes water as he closes the distance, making her back visible twitch. That was the sign of a centelope's instincts for survival, making him stop in place. "I can't get married anymore," she said to herself in horror. Why did the gods find this humorous to happen twice? Was it bigger than the bulls? Why was she comparing them in her head? She closes herself off, balling her body in the water, her body heat already used to the cold. That's why many females within the wall of fangs have their eyes on this fine specimen of a man. They teased him for being fat until they witnessed the destroyer of marriages. Fen announced, as if he was summoning a water deity. They were playing too much, well, Fen was, but by association. The crew heard Juno mumble to herself, freaking out when they realized. "Everyone run," Fen warned, but she had already finished her words of power. "Omnis qui manum domini ducem sentient. Levimen, amalo quem chaos, inflixit sentient." Her eyes glowed green as she brought the words of salve, having her soap form into a viscous layer of medical cream. Yet she didn't attempt to use the spell like it should, still casting it like she did before. The water had an acidity that stung the boy's legs and their little buddies, causing them to scream as they rushed out of the water. The acid burned through their fur as their legs were completely bald from contact. All that was left was the river flowing down with pelts of different colors, with Juno's flowing down with white. Seen, there she was laughing, the leader of the wall of fangs, as she slapped her table while her side hurt. Her second and third commands were still trying to be formal as they stood quietly, but they averted their gaze as they covered their laughs. The Misfits and Juno were lined up at the top point of the wall of fangs, with the ones wearing shorts being smooth. One thing I could say about Moore is that he always finds an interesting bunch of sentients. This really made my day. She continued to laugh as the group expressed their irritated mood from their ears. The Panrius duo just flicked their ears in small spurts. Reinhardt just brought back his ears, and the Infenrials and Juno drooped their ears. The Vulpes twins were more focused on rubbing their now smooth skin, looking at each other with amazement. Now I have to tell my sisters that the river has some foam on the bank that can burn peepees. She could say her sentence. Having the Lyconian on her left showed more emotion as her shoulders were jerking. Goodboy snarls at Fen because he was the one to volunteer in telling the tale. You boys should be smiling. Isn't it every day someone gets a bath and gets trimmed in one river bath? She calms herself, but her words remain upbeat from her smile. She rises from her plush swivel throne, walking toward the crew with great aura. Demona locks eyes with Juno with sweet eyes, gauging her as he walks to her. Age didn't affect her beauty, but complemented it, like a refined and wiser version of Chili. I had an idea that you males were sneaking females into my gates. Just have to gauge the switching in their hips, how much jiggle the ass had. As she pointed out to Juno, the white rabbit couldn't help but focus on Demona's figure as well. She still had very noticeable muscles, but now that she was more of a figurehead, her thighs bounced. She could tell from how big her thighs were that she could have a nice jiggle too. Such a naughty little bun, checking out a woman that could be your mother's age. You centelopes are a dangerous and lustful adversary, Demona said with an aged voice, feeling like the sweet taste of wine as it graced a connoisseur's lips. Juno was extremely intimidated by her aura. She had met confident women before, but she was the apex. Her amber eyes made her gulp as Demona stroked her ashen hair. Mundane features that don't set you apart from other centelopes, but your long frame makes you elegant, with all that goodness going down your hourglass figure. Don't forget the nice pearl that shines on your hair. Demona circles around Juno with almost great hunger, making Juno feel like she's being hunted. Demona slides her blunt claws on Juno's hips, feeling down her coat's fabric. It makes Juno blush, especially when there is an audience. The boys only watched as silently as Juno was, being fully invested in seeing how this would play out. The canines panted, and the Panrius wiggled their small tails, while Reinhardt only swayed his tail with each clack of her boots. Even Demona's aides were wagging their tails and followed her little game. Nice and squishy in all the right places, with ruby eyes that shine with hope and understanding. Truly the difference that could change a girl's appeal. Demona grabs her throat with a firm yet loose grip as she guides it side to side. Juno couldn't help herself but moan as she submerged herself in this femme fatale of a Lyconian. Her ears are so emotive, and with that innocence, she could whet the appetite of any man, especially a human. Demona throws her grip off of Juno, having her softly grunt while Demona walks back to her desk. Juno was entrance, but came back to reality from her mention of humans. Juno had a worried look as she remembered the slayer from the day before. Demona saw her weakness, checking her as she plops down on her throne. So this white rabbit has a male in her mind, human. My girls do like it when competition enters the gate. It gets them a little bit peeved. Demona said in a playful manner, only for her aides to betray it with a growl. Juno was internally freaking out. She was getting too close to what happened yesterday. She eyes the boys for an opinion. Bulwag sweats, but is submissive, and Goodboy is just shaking his head violently. Don't worry, girls. There is only one male that she would smuggle flour for, one that has no residence in our castle. Demona said with confidence as she leaned on her chair while crossing her legs. The aides look confused, then they focus on the Infenreals and Juno, who had their cheeks puffed out. She knows what has conspired, and Juno shakes as Demona stares daggers at her. Yet she then calms her gaze and body, supporting her head on her hands, posting on her table. How do you know? Juno said with a scorn, which had Demona's aides read their swords on their hips. Demona calmed them with a nonchalant flick of her wrist, as she was intrigued by the bunny's bite. Bulwag and Goodboy were looking at her like she was a madwoman, while the rest looked puzzled. How did this man look? Demona said with a commanding voice, causing Juno to flinch. Demona refused to answer her question because she was in her castle. Juno only saw this creature, a monster more than a man. He was faceless and inexpressive, yet she focused on his alluring green eyes. Yet through this monster's eyes, she saw a tired man done with it all. Tired, fat-eyed, she said, while she played with her ear, as if her emotions were jumbled up. Demona squints her eyes not in anger, but in compassion. How did he kill, if you mind me asking? Demona asked without a hint of anger, which confused Juno. Why is she playing this game if, for some reason, she knows what happened? It would just be better if she had just been prosecuted already, but she had to see how he killed. He did it quickly, with no wasted movement, lacking in emotion, but lacking anger and satisfaction. Without remorse, but without anger or glee. She said as she realized that the slayer did exactly as he said. He doesn't enjoy the bloodshed, being more concerned about the people he allied with. Demona raises her head, then straightens her back, swiveling her chair without any more curiosity. That doesn't sound like a man that would kill my girls, Demona said as she looked out her vibrant stained glass window. Juno was even more confused. Why did it sound like she wasn't getting murdered right now? Demona is a wise wolf, knowing that her prey was questioning why she wasn't fulfilling her natural order. My girls went to that flower bed east of Mellow Ground. Ghouls were sighted as they fed on the bodies of the dead. The people of Mellow Ground and my clan have a non-aggression pact. Its gold doesn't feed my girls. The hides of ghouls do make for heavy leather armor, selling well outside our little part of paradise. Ghouls. Juno only heard about them in books, a nightmarish creature that made the sentients question the finale of death. They are corpses brought back with ancient magic, lost to the current mages of the world. The only known user was the High Necromancer, a demon general that lived as long as the Horn of Chaos. It was a venom that passed down to the corpses that the horde couldn't bear, small injections on intact bodies to bring them back to life. They were mindless husks at the end, with no origin resorting to the consumption of rotten meat. That would be enough for the lady, but like everything on this plane, those husks could evolve. One alpha ghoul could choose a body of its liking, injecting it with this necrosis venom, and curdling next to it for weeks. The newly formed ghoul would eat the flesh of the alpha, as the alpha's tissue blended itself into the new organs of the ghoul. The alpha's nerves would take the ghoul's body over, becoming an amalgamation far more dangerous than before. Female corpses like to stay agile and quick, only blending with females that look like them before necrosis. The bodies would stack on one another, forming a corpse centipede that would strike fast. They would playfully laugh like beautiful maidens having the time of their lives, hiding in bushes for ambushes. Once their weight becomes too heavy for the main torso, the ghoulish centipede would convert new ghouls waiting for them to turn, only to add their arms into her body, devouring the rest. Male corpses like brawn or anything else, having the power to push their kin when food is around. Alpha ghouls would just add more body mass, eating the brain while its body lives, so it could fuse its muscles to its own. When he's big enough, eating the head becomes a difficulty, as it continues to add more mass. These ghouls are called legionaries, with some legends saying that the mass could rival an orchaltodon. It would have the other ghouls snarling in its body, but the only one that would dine would be the alpha. Their hide could reach the durability of steel, depending on the stages, with normal hides being better than cattle. It wouldn't be as palatable as the bounty for Serpent Slayer, but politics dictate that the WOF members didn't earn his head. Was it because they were women? No, it's because they had half-borns. A party of 5 went to handle an equal group of ghouls. The intel forgot to mention that it had a ghoulish centipede. One of them got critically injured. We don't know if she's going to make it with all those tears in her flesh. Juno's guilt was boiling over. She shook in her boots as she marinated. Ghouls are attracted to large amounts of death. If a beast doesn't feast first, then the ghouls will act as decomposers. They would choose death over the living, but that's just a matter of how hungry they are. The other died. She was the one to figure out that a centipede hid in the cover of trees. It lunged at her, injecting its venom into her when the surviving ghouls feasted on her organs. It knew that she would die once it had her, so it only hastened the necrosis. Demona said so calmly, but the lack of her visible face showed how hurt she was. The aide droops their ears with her memory, yet prostrating themselves out of the queen's respect. The misfits all handled their condolences in their different ways, but only guilt-filled Juno. She started to tear up, looking at the floor in a frail way to hide her frustrations with herself. A jade hunter helped the rest live, Demona added, making Juno's ears flick with a bit of shock. Juno looks back up to see the Lyconians smiling at her. He bludgeoned through their thick hides and engulfed the centipede in flame, my girl said. He laid their sister to rest as necrosis slowed her sentience, cradling her within his tired arms. She said, with a little romance. It sounded like a fairy tale when she told it. Juno was left in her blanked noggin as she was being complimented for helping the slayer. If you ask me, little rabbit, I am very grateful that the hunter slayed that gourmet Callisto and set ablaze the camp. My girls have been coming back more often than before, from close to home, that is, Demona clarified, which made Juno think back to the day at the baths with the masseuses. They told the tale of two Slater-s, but she only had the pleasure of meeting one. Wolfslayer, Juno said, as it was the natural deduction, getting a snap of confirmation from Demona. His name was upgraded to Lyconian Slayer. Farther down south is where my girls have been going missing. No matter how much coin we give out for intel, no slavers, merchants, or bandits could claim they were the ones, pointing their fingers at him. A beast slayer's presence can stir a community up, but when they have the names of sentience on their title, then they become true demons. Names like Centelope Flayer, Panrius Skyner, and Calistocan Crusher were names recorded in history. I have my paws tied by the rise in monster sightings after my neighbors freaked out about a lone hunter. Their hysteria shifted to all the undesirables of the triangle. She takes a gander at the whole crew, as she said. From a third party, Juno knew that would mean the Orc brothers, as she didn't really see Moore or Sickli after the case. I've been telling the settlements around that the reason we weren't swimming in any monsters, any ghouls, or any new young bandit crew was the Orcs' doing. Now that our side had been peaceful for a while, now everyone could slay a manticore. Demona seemed frustrated. It would seem that running a settlement wasn't easy with so much politics. Do you boys and Bun know about the refugees of Grispaw correctly? She said as she pulled a cigar out of her desk, with one of the aides striking a match to light it. She waits for the clear burn on the rolled-up paper, puffing it to strike it with life. She turns her gaze to the biggest cat in the room, Reinhardt, who had been silent until that point. Yes, ma'am, Reinhardt said, straightening his back, sweating from the spotlight. with the parties looking for their sisters, the minuscule aid that I've been sending to neighbors and hunts that would have been dealt with if the orcs weren't ostracized. My able bodies are low. You fine gentleman and rabbit will help load some supplies on the wagons and ship them out up the mountain trail, understood? She asked with a blow from her stogie, really showing herself with authority. Yes, ma'am, the misfits said in unison. Demona waved them away, which the crew respected without a word. Juno let the larger bodies go through the door before herself, meaning the entire crew. As Bullwag exited and it was her turn, she heard a cough from Demona. Wait, little rabbit, before you go, Demona said as she walked towards Juno from her seat. Juno jolted by her focus, feeling like the little session earlier was going to continue. Demona went to her shoulder and went close to her ear, making Juno blush. When the days are done and your crew arrives at the wall for the night, head to my bedchambers, she asked with sincerity, but Juno still had some thoughts. She was still a maiden. She still hadn't locked lips with a boy yet. She didn't want her first time to be with a spicy and unorthodox pairing. She hid herself in her hands, which made Demona produce a vein on her head. I'm not asking to lay with you. Just my girls would smoother you in your sleep if you are anywhere near the males. Demona points to her aides behind her, guiding Juno's eyes to the two. They were still staring daggers at her, not making their intentions clear. I already called a dip on the injured blonde human in the infirmary. Got that little rabbit. If you even talk to my droopy poo, I'll be feasting on that fat ham of yours. She was enemy number one. Men were a resource worth diamonds in the wall of fangs. She turned towards Demona and hugged her, which made the elder Lyconian bug-eyed. She then looks at the tall rabbit with motherly eyes, patting her on her back. Juno stops their embrace and catches up with the boy S, heading down the stone stairs. Gonna work you as hard as the boys. I'll send Winnie and Blair to keep you misfits company. She waves at Juno with a blow of her cigar, which Juno may have been hypercritical of the leader of these women. She now seems like the mother wolf of a large pack of females. Scene, Day 6, Juno's notes. Hello journal, or howdy. I don't know how to start the beginning of this journal, but I would like to keep track of my life within the triangle of chaos, with all the things that are happening. The beast slayer, ghouls, monsters, and just the regular populace of the triangle have shown me that my life could very well be gone tomorrow. The likelihood of this journal reaching my parents is slim, but whoever finds this, please have a heart. I would like this to be shipped to Alana/District 16 at John's Smithy's Smith Company, 712, to either John Smith or Morgan Smith, formerly Morgan Hellfoot. If they are not available, then I would like my two older siblings to have this journal, Judas Smith or Monica Smith. Before I started the job that Ms. Demona Razorfang had given to the Moore clan, I passed by a shop that had really nice notebooks on the shelves. The shopkeeper didn't want to sell this notebook to me, but with some negotiations from Bullwag, she budged. It is still a little awkward around all these males around me. My father would freak out if he ever found out. As a consolation, there are no centelope males within the group for now, and the only half-born around seems to have another within his heart. I wouldn't say that the group wasn't filled with attractive men, with Reinhardt being built like a lumberjack. He was a tall panthimata, but there was no chance with him having a mate that he's pretty stable with. The Vulpes twins, Fen and Finn, are cute in the boyish sense, a little annoyingly so, as they have better skin than I do. Finn is a shy boy who usually waits for his brother to be around, keeping to himself and familiar faces. His brother was the opposite, being mischievous and the clown of the group, with enough swagger to be funny at times. I'm still a bit indifferent to Yukon and Billy. They only fight with each other for Ramai's hand or ignore me. This doesn't mean anything bad. Panrius takes time to warm up to new faces. Both Bullwag and Goodboy do have their charms, but I ship Bullwag with Ramai so much. He got a little flustered when I told him about her, which almost had me shout. Goodboy seems to be a very happy-go-lucky guy, apparently having a thing for Chili. Yet last night, it would seem that he had no real faith in her, spending a night with another woman. I wouldn't blame him, though. Chili doesn't really seem like a girl that would ever be with anybody instead of a strong Lyconian. This is what I just wrote. I really hate how my centelope brain functions, focusing on pairings and relationships. Anyway, we waited at the center of the wall of fangs, next to 4 very empty wagons lined up at the commons. Fen passed around herbs to everyone, but I declined for moral reasons. The 2 aides the boys and I saw in Damona's office are Winnie and Blair, the 2 female Lyconians that had not so friendly things to say about me. Apparently, this place is run by women, a fact that both mother and sister would appreciate. They are very hostile to women in general, though. This was a good place for half-borns and humans, but only if you're male. Of course, they snarled at me, but Damona's words were absolute to these 2. They gave us a tour of the castle, only the places that we would need to know. The first stop was the cellar, which was just 2 swinging doors next to the stables. There were kegs of wine and boxes neatly stacked together in bays, making a U shape. They brought us to where the salted meat was, looking vaguely like the boxes I saw in the gourmet camp. Winnie told me that there was nothing but centelope meat in these boxes, but Blair slapped her across the head. Blair corrected her that the contents are salted monster meat from terror birds, bears, and gulpers. She assured them that these were actual sentient proof rations, pulling out a slab for the 2 infenrials. They actually had a sizable medical bay, with a granny Lyconian acting as the castle's doctor. There were 2 humans placed in beds, with bandages on one's legs and another on his chest. Each one of them had either an infenrial or Lyconian pampering them. For injured warriors, they seemed to be living the male fantasy. I accidentally locked eyes with one of them as the women grew hostile, so I quickly avoided the gaze. There were at least 6 injured, having a friend or blood sister helping them with their recovery. All of them seemed fine roughly, except the one at the far end. There was a cloth slung over her as her party members wept at the corpse that had recently succumbed to her wounds. The one weeping by the bed was the one Goodboy had spent a night with, which made him concerned for her. Winnie grabbed his arm, shaking her head no, and we walked deeper into the medical storage. I had to do my part, they said, which meant that I should carry down some medical supplies as well. I wasn't strong enough for the weight they needed, which caused them to yell out more. They were more relaxed with the brothers, though, both of them having me help them with large containers of blankets and pillows. Light by themselves, but packed densely together, was the problem. Once we brought all of the food, medical supplies, and bedding out, a couple of extra wagons came loaded with cargo. Of course, this castle didn't have the luxury to supply the refugees with their own resources, teaming up with local caravans. They wouldn't travel west. Many people were dying from diseases and malnutrition, attracting ghouls and monsters. This is when I had been a great help. My magic finally had a purpose for today. It was going to be grueling work, unloading all these products into the Fang's wagon, so I used a bind to do my heavy lifting. The boys thanked me for being there, as the traders actually gave some coins for how fast we did the job. Time is money, and all. We finished the job for the night. With the loaded cargo, the walk would take the majority of a day, and walking in the night is near suicide. We were given the day just to drink and dance, which the Misfits had no questions about after. The night was young, so I had at least a potent swig of wine with my plate of roasted pork and rice. Bullwag, Fen, and I joined shoulders to sing that Johnny song that I heard on the first day of camp. Right now, Johnny would be a good boy, as he cried for another woman who told him that he was being a vice. She didn't really like Infenrials either, which stung his heart ever so more. Scene, Day 6 nighttime. It was time to head back to Demona's room, as Juno still felt a little weary of her. She stood at the large door, giving it a knock. "Come in, little rabbit." Demona gave her okay, as Juno twisted the door handle, opening it with a bit of her muscle. What she saw surprised her, as the whole queen-sized room was filled with little bunks of sleeping children. Juno saw the majority of these children as the day passed, playing and socializing in the morning. "So this is where all these kids go," Juno said as she surveyed the room, with small pups tucked in bed, the ones that don't have parents. Demona pets a small pup gently as the little pup went deep into slumber with her plush orc. The brutal answer didn't surprise her. With the triangle circumstances, orphans should be a factor. The gender seemed equal within the space, betraying the whole bit about women running. Demona saw Juno focusing on the boys with a ponder, reading her body language. "Yes, sons are welcome here too," Demona whispered as she let the pup sleep, walking towards Juno. "The triangle isn't kind to boys, as they always get sent out for the real horrors, never to come back. Demona said with sadness, swirling her body in a dance. The flash of the lad passes by Juno's head, making her tap on the floor softly as she collects her thoughts. Thinking about the lad made her question as to who Demona came to the conclusion that she was there that night. Ms. Demona, I would like to ask the question as to how you figured out my dealings with the Slayer, Juno said with a slouch. Demona flicks her ears at the rabbit's bluntness. She looked at the ceiling with a ponder, leaning into her bed. It was all that party of girls doing. They smelled the same flower laced on the hunter's armor on a certain centerlope with a bunny breaking cock. She said in a whisper, so that the children wouldn't hear the scandalous comment. Juno bites her lip from the sudden jab, her face turning beet red. Demona controlled her laughter, expressing it through her breath. Juno should really be more careful by the good sense of smell of the infenreals, Lyconians too. Why do they have to say that? Why are these women so blunt? Juno hides herself within her palms, cradling her body to feel smaller. Demona smiles at the innocent rabbit, supporting her head on her palm, posted on her elbow. Moore always had a good taste in people, bringing in the rejects from around the triangle and making characters of them. Demona said as she swung her legs out of the bed's end, confirming that she did have a past from Moore, maybe being a member of his clan a lifetime ago. She was wrong, though. Chili and Lynn were the ones that found her in the world. I was actually rescued by Lynn and Chili. If they hadn't found me, I could only dread the thoughts. Juno said with a bitter and sweet memory, being rescued by the Orthodox duo, save by Sickle-Eye's favorite and the killer rabbit Huh. They were basically raised by the orcs, so they should know their preferences. Demona said with a nod, happy about the actions of the two. She made it sound like she was an offering to the orcs, bound and served on a plate with a red apple. Demona cut the fantasy short, falling backward on the bed, grabbing Juno's arm to pull her in. She squeaks as the Lyconian laid by her side elevated as she held a loose grip on her. Sheesh, you're a talker, aren't you? Little girls like you should know that bed rest does wonders for the day after. Demona said as she locked her eyes warmly with Juno. Concerned thoughts were coming back as the woman wags her tail. But you didn't tell me where I was going to sleep. She asked the question as she looked at her with worry. Demona laughed as she thought the question was obvious. Here, of course, Demona said with a devilish smile, which caused all the alarms in Juno's head to fire. She wouldn't do it here. Next to kids, right? Questions that meant nothing as Demona said her words of power. Pernicter pernoctum, corpus solum quietum te exitet. Juno was dazed by her words, sounding like the incantation of the words of slumber. Her body wasn't responding to her thoughts, making her feel like her body wasn't her own. Her eyes were closing. All her thoughts just turned into melted ice, drowning her in slumber. The last thing she thought was how dangerous this Demona Razorfang was. Demona Razorfang was.